Thank you. Thank you very much. First, I must say that this morning I was ambushed because I came with all humility to be able to listen, understand, learn from what I would hear here, from what can be considered as progress, weaknesses in our approach, because we are nose to the grindstone. Unfortunately, we can't see everything. He talked about risks, challenges, pitfalls, and many things. So often we might not have an overall view. So we have thought that by coming here this morning, it would be an opportunity to hear from you, and then to be able, in some cases, to adjust our approach. So ultimately, I find myself chairing a session. So I don't claim to have the answers. I believe I have listened with complete humility. I think I have understood, in any case, learned a lot from the various interventions and truly heard the different messages. There is nothing that was said in this room that I find unacceptable or out of place. I think these are things that complement what we are trying to do and also lead us to question ourselves. In order to move forward, we are in a framework that has also been dictated by the geopolitical context where choices were made, and which, to say the least, are choices of rupture. We must accept that because we cannot continue down this path. We can't even turn the page. I believe we need to leave the book entirely. We need to leave the book. We can't turn the page. I think what is important is that our heads of state, they have the vision, they have the political ambition, but you and we must help them reach where we want to go. Or we couldn't reach it alone among military decision makers or others in compartments. I don't want us to say that this is a fight of Goita, Chani Diop, or President Traore, or that it's the artists. No, I think it's a fight that belongs to us, because what we are doing today, there are others who started and couldn't finish. The Modibo Goitas, the Nkrumas, and others, well, they left it somewhere. And it's a long-term fight. Unfortunately, we Africans, where we often lose, we fight today, we get excited, and then tomorrow we've forgotten. But our adversaries are in it for the long haul. And why? Today, do European decision makers take responsibility for what was done, even before colonization, during colonization, and after, even though they weren't even born? But because they are in the continuity of what was started, so we need to tell ourselves that things continue. And when we even look at the geopolitical environment of our countries, if you consider the existence of the force Barkhane, to talk about history, the Barkhane force, if you look at its area, the zones it covers, they were the same zones as before. An organization, an attempt at state organization that existed before independence, which is the Common Organization of Saharan States. You overlay the two maps, it's the same thing. That means from colonization to today and into the future, they pursue the same objectives. Unfortunately, we work in the short term, we work within regimes, we work for individuals, etc., in narrow frameworks. We need to understand that, well, we can engage in politics and many things, but the future of our countries is a long-term issue. And we must remain vigilant, we must continue the work, and not tell ourselves that in 2 days, 3 days, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, it's over. No, we must be able to. That's why culture becomes an important factor, because you can't focus on the long term by sticking to political considerations. Only culture allows us to even prepare the children who are not yet born for the challenges that await us. Because the father cannot finish this fight. So, if we haven't thought about the long-term strategy by considering what we call culture, it's somewhat how to shape our children to inherit what is important, understand their environment, understand the issues, take them on, be motivated, and organize themselves. And even if culture is a natural protection against a number of challenges. So, for me, that is important. It's true, we've talked about decolonizing the narrative. There's another decolonization, but I believe that what is important is truly the mental decolonization. Because I believe that the target that was hit is our mind first. But why? It's because they colonized us by coming and didn't just send We saw religious figures, academics. It was a civilizing mission. So, to get out of the problem we are in, first, I believe a Cameroonian writer spoke of cultural adjustment, but we even need a cultural revolution. We need to get out because unfortunately we are in it and we don't even know it. Today, we ourselves have become agents of these policies without even realizing it. Someone mentioned digital technology earlier. It's true. When you open your phone in the morning, everything you start reading, someone has set an agenda for you. What happened in the world? What's going on? So you yourself are on their topic. You worry, perhaps about an old woman who fell from a building in Paris, a fire in Tel Aviv, or something else. But if people die in Ségou, it's not an event because it's not in the content presented to you. So I think our revolution, first, it's mental. Unfortunately, I don't want to defend our states, and each of us is accountable. And when the colonizer left, he had prepared us so well that we put on the colonizer's shoes, and unfortunately, we treated our population the way the colonizer treated us. And you know what some call the persecuted syndrome. Someone who has been persecuted develops a 90% chance of doing the same to others. So we are in a trauma. If we ourselves don't get out of it, we go to the villages, we treat the villagers like the colonizers treated us. We are condescending, we think they are ignorant, they don't speak French, they don't know this or that language, they know the problem better than we do. So, I think what is important is to step out of the boots of the colonizer, to eventually step out of his book. And first of all, even if you look at our intellectuals when we go to conferences, all their references are Western, yet we have the Ampateba, we have the Nkrumah, we have others who have thought for us. We even have people who are not known. We have our proverbs, but why don't we try to bring all that out? Because you cannot be in someone else's book and beat them. Impossible. This doesn't mean we should reject others, but we must understand that we need to have this mental revolution, as he said at the banquet of history, because when you go to what they call globalization, in reality, it's not globalization, it's a westernization of the world, where we have no role, we endure, we are subjects. So, in this globalization, only culture allows Africa to come with a practical superiority compared to many countries. Because many of these countries, as one of our former heads of state said, we were smoking when others were not. So I think that is important. When we talk about globalization, you cannot come empty-handed. What do you bring? You bring your identity, your journey, your history. There are many things, your honor, your dignity. So I think it seems extremely important to me to first talk about mental decolonization. I think our brother or someone mentioned here issues of wealth or poverty. But that too, they put it in our heads that we were poor. And we ourselves became convinced that we are poor. When the AES started as well, everyone said 3 landlocked poor countries, they will go nowhere. And many, unfortunately, among us started to recite that. But what is poverty? What is wealth? And why are we poor? And those who are rich, when they are in our country, even when we tell them to leave, they do not go. Because we have been made poor, including mentally. Because if you are poor, I believe it is the poverty of ambition, the poverty of imagination, the poverty of understanding the situation we are in. Because when they tell you that you are poor, even if you are sitting on gold, you will not see it. Because you see the gold with the other, whereas the other sees the gold at your feet. He needs to make you poor because others are unfortunately in certain patterns. Not win-win. They are in patterns where you have to be poor for him to be rich. Because if you start to think wealth for him, I am in the process of. So I think that we, the population, really need to get ourselves out of this to be put into, yes, I believe it is a manufactured poverty. It is an institutional poverty, a poverty that has put us in situations where we are not even aware of either our poverty or our wealth. So I think that this seems to be an important element. I truly believe, at least for me, everything happens in the mind. And one of the most important problems for Africans is that This mental, including many of our intellectuals do not dare to address certain questions that they know that they are proficient in because they lack confidence. When a professor from the University of Bamako produces a document, it reaches the head of state, or at least some heads of state. In the past, it was set aside, and we are no longer quick to read the writings of a Western or white intern who is in our administrations. That means we ourselves do not have confidence. I often tell some people that if Bill Gates were in Africa or Mali, would he have had the chance he had? Probably not, because our young people who are geniuses in our neighborhoods are treated as crazy. When they start making small devices where they excel, people call them crazy. And in the other part of the world, when you are in a university, you have many things. From university, the top students are selected. Big companies come looking for you. They seek you out. There is a bank ready to invest in you. A market is created for you, so perhaps it is this environment that we lack. So we do not have, including us politicians, we do not have confidence in ourselves. Even because if you don't have confidence, you won't have courage either. Because, as Nelson Mandela says, it's always impossible until someone does it. Yet we are made to doubt that it's not possible. Don't even try. What you are saying, what we have started, we must see it through to the end. We must really think long term. I also want to accept some elements of criticism that seem important to me. It's true. We should make more room for women in the process. First, not to please them, not to give them a gift, because they make up at least 60% of the population in our societies. Because it is they who give birth to us, it is they who raise us. And I think that people have managed the world enough to lead us to failures. Maybe we should also try something else. There you go. And economically, it makes sense. Culturally, it makes sense because a woman in a community, a woman raises a community, a village. So I think that we must, in our internal organization of the AES or in organizing this type of debate, make room for women. It's true for young people as well. Everything we do within the framework of the AES has worked because there is popular mobilization. So when we organize these events, I believe that I accept on behalf of Minister Dafé and others that we must make efforts at this level for women, young people, but also someone to speak about the communities. Because even this debate, it is rich, it is dense, it is extremely important, but we are at 30,000 feet, at 10,000 meters altitude of discussion. As the Ivorians used to say, can we bring it down to earth, go down to the level of the grassroots communities? All the good ideas that are there, can we have them verified with our communities, in their language, in their environment, so that they can also be stakeholders? It's true that we have many intellectuals around this table, but those communities are also wise in their own way. So I think these three elements are missing in our approach. And all the recommendations that have been made here seem very relevant to me. And it is important that we can truly consolidate them and bring them to the attention of our heads of state. We will ask Minister Dafé and myself to be your interpreters with our heads of state so that we can integrate these elements. I believe some have even mentioned a general state at the ACE level. Mali has done it, maybe other countries will do it too, and we can do something at the ACE level, but let's not forget these three key segments: women, youth, and grassroots communities, so that they are fully involved. And there should also be perhaps a think tank or advisory group at the confederal level from all this wisdom that can help us how to translate that. There is a common policy, cultural young policy, that has just been adopted. Perhaps in its implementation, we need to check. Maybe many of these elements can complement or clarify aspects of it. Why not also raise all the questions that are there in our universities? I do not claim to have the answer, but let's encourage our students, our researchers in universities to write their theses instead of going to write their theses on the European Union. Or, I don't know, the common market of South America, but that we can work on all these questions because research starts there. So let's ensure that universities, academics can be fully involved in this. Academics can be fully involved in these elements. Well, I think there have been a lot of questions. I can't answer everything. Digital technology also seems to me to be an important element, the questions of content. But we also need to understand that when we talk about culture, we are not talking about rejection and closure towards others. Modern countries today, like even the United States, Japan, India, China, are extremely modern countries. But they are also countries that are fully rooted in their tradition. So it's not about opposing, but one must master their identity, their culture, and everything in order to even be able to absorb. Our problem is that we have set everything aside, we have put on someone else's clothes, and we are inside them. So now I believe that one really needs to be rooted, because when you are rooted in your culture, in your traditions, you have the confidence to absorb. And if you don't have that, in fact, what the French and others propose is assimilation. You are asked to leave everything at the door and enter another path. So for me, that is extremely important. Therefore, in relation to modernity, our countries can remain rooted in their culture while staying open and master the elements of this modernity. He talked about digital technology. It's not about rejecting digital technology. All our young people today are on TikTok. But how can you promote culture if what we are talking about doesn't exist on their TikTok? So we need to organize ourselves to create content on TikTok, in More, in Hausa, in Diarma, in Bambara, in our languages. They know these creations. If our young people go on TikTok, they will see what interests us in it. Because as long as we're not there, we're in someone else's book. Because TikTok is generated by the United States, by others. So our children are thinking about other parameters, about other values. So we need to love ourselves. Today, the fight in Africa, we have been able to win the media battle because our young people have invested in this media environment. But now the other challenge is how to create the necessary content to be able to stay and resist this change and use the weapons against them. That's what it's about. It's about being very pragmatic. What works is us. What works for others, we will take it, but we can even make these elements our own. Because science is universal. But it depends. If we haven't stayed, we don't have content in that case. We will just absorb what's inside because it's ultimately just a vehicle. Well, these are a few elements without claiming. To answer your questions, I believe that EBA touched on a point that seems important to me. I think I will end here. I think what motivates us in the AES, what motivates the heads of state, is to break away from the framework, the integration model we've known until now in our countries, which are frameworks based on institutions, and these institutions that we do not control, which may be designed by others with modes of operation that are very detached from our realities. And in the AES, the heads of state have the ambition to move towards the integration of peoples. How can we achieve the integration of peoples? How can we be different? Because our biggest criticism is that in a few years, we might be told that yes, AES, ECOWAS, all united, it's the same thing. That is a failure. We cannot achieve the integration of peoples without changing the paradigm, as someone pointed out. How to maintain this popular mobilization of women, of young people? Today, when you go to Burkina, you go to Mali, you go to Niger, you can feel there is popular enthusiasm, but this popular enthusiasm is not permanent. We need to be able to channel it. We need to be able to maintain it. In order for us to project it, we need to be able to supply it. And one of the key elements, one of the key indicators in relation to that is free movement. You even try to be diplomatic. I think there's no need. No, we know that at our borders. There are harassments, there are hassles, there are scams happening, not only at the borders. We can leave here to go to another country. How many checkpoints do we have in a single country? Is this what we want for our populations? For me, the real indicator will be that a fabric seller at the Bamako market can move and go sell his products in Ouaga or Bobo. He will say to himself, Alhamdulillah, for me, things have changed. If we don't have that, it means we have failed. Today, we have a group that is working with the ministers of security, the ministers of defense, and others, and the minister, even of economy and finance, who instills customs to be able to try to establish corridors that can greatly facilitate the movement of our people to make a difference, and also put in place all the necessary infrastructures. I don't have the time to go into details, but many things that you mentioned, even in terms of pooling cultural events, which are already in our roadmap, perhaps new elements deserve to be added. But in summary and ultimately, I think that only culture allows us today to move forward, to make breaks where necessary, and also to form alliances where necessary, to be confident in order to progress. But let's not move forward alone. Let's not move forward in a compartmentalized way. Let's try to have everything we need in this fight to be able to advance. We need to extend a hand to everyone in order to move forward. Someone mentioned here that we are saying, perhaps from a confederal or state perspective, the AES today consists of the 3 states, but we know that outside of the AES, many people share this struggle because they have experienced the same traumas as we have. They are facing the same difficulties. Perhaps they will provide different types of responses. There are people from the diaspora in the Antilles, in the Americas, everywhere, our own diaspora. We need to truly integrate all these people because culture can be a unifying force. Extremely important. I can tell you that we have heard you and we have understood many things. Personally, I will advocate for everything I have heard here, but this debate cannot be exhausted in 2 hours. We need to find ways to make these permanent discussions and especially to extract the useful elements for action. Thank you